Welcome to Three, a part of the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. I'm Gill Gross with Joel Drucker and Amy Lundy. 3 rounds in the books for Novak Djokovic at Roland Garros. I feel like we nailed it kind of pre-tournament, Amy. We said first round, no problem. Second round, a little bit tough. Some challenges there. Third round, very difficult for a third round match. You're going to have to deal with a very, very talented player who might be able to push you. All 3 of those things, I think, would kind of is how it played out.
Absolutely. This was the trickiest match against Alejandro Davidovich Fokina. And he had beaten him in Monte Carlo. And again, I keep harping on this, that I think best of 5 is really what separates. Even though it was a straight set win, it was complicated. It was a long match, well over 3 hours. And it's just very daunting and for a task for any player to try to knock off Novak Djokovic. And I thought that even though Novak had some little minor injuries and bothers with the wind, in the end, the tiebreakers were phenomenally played, as he does. And overall, the viewing quality of the match was very high.
I agree. I think this was the Grand Slam version of the kind of test we wanted Novak to endure in Rome and in some of the earlier clay court things. And so now it happens at a Grand Slam versus an opponent. What I like about Davidovich Fokina, he's not playing the game of today. He's trying to play the game of tomorrow. And I started to think, this is just one of my half-baked theories, that just as there are players, how Dimitrov is like the baby fed and Coric is sort of like a mini Novak, not quite as proficient. Fokina at times, he's like the lesser Alcaraz at times. Some of his adventureness, some of his shot, not as skilled, not as proficient, not as buffed and polished, but he's onto something. I mean, the ways he tries to go about winning points, the shots he comes up with, then sort of the incredible inventions out of nowhere because he has to improvise. This is one of the most enjoyable straight set matches you'll ever see.
I like the Alcaraz Fokina comparison because it's an explosive speed that is almost breathtaking at times with Fokina. There's touch and feel and cat and mouse. There's also big power. It comes off of both wings. So that's why I say is the most talented player outside of the top 25 in men's tennis. But I also thought we saw the other side of the coin. Like Amy, you mentioned that the tie breaks were incredible for Novak, and it's when he played his best tennis. Is it unfair to say Davidovich Fokina? Look, I don't think he played terrible tie breaks, but he wasn't quite as tough. He wasn't quite as consistent. He made more errors come the tie breaks than he was making for the rest of the sets.
Well,
I saw a phenomenal graphic on, sorry about that, Joel, on Matthew Willis tweeted it. And it was that just like in Moneyball, where there was kind of a trend established, and then at the very end of the book, when the playoffs start, the script flips and the trend reverses. In this case, Davidovich Fokina, leading up to the tie breaks in both sets, had won maybe one more of the longer rallies, 9+. But other than that, they were pretty dead even. And then going into the tiebreak, the long rallies ended up being crucial because Novak dominated those. So, how we talk about so much of the game is played in under 4 shots, 0 to 4 shots. But there may be something to the thought that the longer rallies in the tiebreaks become crucial. And that's where Novak played really well in these tiebreaks.
Well, we've seen this again and again, and I think Novak could write a whole book on the kind of the art and science of the tiebreak, which is, it's not just as simple as don't miss and lock down. There's a certain self-awareness and an awareness when you're playing a lower ranked player. They've got a red line more. And this is why I think Davidovich Fokina, he's outside the top 25 for a reason, at least now. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying, look at this guy, he's going to be 13 in the world. It's just, what I like, and this is the developmental lesson for coaches and players out there. Look what's going on with this guy. Look what's going on with Alcaraz. Look how the styles of play are evolving beyond the big 3 era, because Novak's the impregnable force right now. that has to be solved. And I was very impressed by the way he went about winning points and attempting to win points. And yeah, and that tiebreaker, that's when the margins get thin and things get tight, and experience and pulling off shots. That's where you get that whole, what a risk reward, all that stuff.
Joel, do you know who said this? I think Jim Courier said this on a broadcast. The quote stuck with me, but who said it has not stuck with me. The greatest players in this sport, under pressure, play like themselves. They play exactly like themselves. They don't deviate.
I don't remember who said that, but I love the quote, because it means it's not about raising your game. It's about just having your game. And it's like, there you are. And Billie Jean, I'll tell you a quote Billie Jean King said that's kind of a corollary to that. She says, oh, the better players, we just choke 10% less.
Mm-hmm.
We just choke.
I like the quote, defense wins championships. That's always been one of my favorite quotes. And Novak just wasn't missing in those tie breaks. I mean, he locks in. But yeah, Joel, to your point, he doesn't push. He just hits a very high quality shot with a lot of depth over and over and over again, and the pressure becomes immense, and the other player misses.
Go watch. It's older, a different era, different time. Chris Evert, and it's kind of funny. And I sometimes think to myself with Novak, we've talked about this, defense, offense. What really defines applying pressure? You know, Novak, he's not just retrieving and flinging balls back. He's applying pressure in his way too, and it's subtle. It's subtle, but we've seen it. The depth, the balance. How do I get a hold of this guy? Where's my way in? And and hitting winners at any stage of a match, much less the late stages, is not easy. It's one thing to hit them at 2-all, but then now you're at crunch time, forcing errors, not so easy.
I also think there's an understanding of energy management. I don't think the way Novak plays in the tiebreak, you might be listening to us and, you know, you're hearing us say things like Novak just doesn't miss in tiebreaks. And the thought might be, well, why doesn't he just always do that? Just always do that the whole set. I don't think physically it's feasible, but I think there's an understanding that if I play my fair bit of offense and point shortening, and I make sure, you know, that I kind of have the energy at the end of the set or in the biggest moments to dig in, lock in. If I need to go 5 hours, go 5 hours. But come time to play the 18-ball rally, even though I'm not in my 20s anymore, I'm able to do it.
Well, and the tiebreaker is such a neat thing. I talked to Agassi once about playing them, and he said, look, I'm tired, been out there for a while. Just think, give me 15 good minutes. And so now your dialogue with yourself revolves around something different than like an epic match. It's like, I'm just taking this short quiz and just need to focus that way. And it's also interesting. It's the way you think. Think about it, you guys. Practicing tiebreakers is one thing, but playing them at the end of a set is another. Play 12 games. The guy's showing you all these cards, all these things, all these questions, all these answers. Like, okay, we're dead even now, but I know I'm better than you. And Novak, again and again in these tiebreakers, so good, so good.
Yeah, then there's also the fact that the end of the Fucsovics match, not the very, very end, but, you know, the second half of it, and the end of the Fokina match were a lot more comfortable for Djokovic than the beginning. And that's another aspect with the energy thing. It's like, if Fokina has Novak, it has the ability to play toe-to-toe on Novak's level, well, how long can he do that? Like, what is the level of intensity that requires? And is that a long-term intensity or is that a short-term intensity? Like, I think in order to actually be threatening and win the match, your kind of baseline cruiser mode needs to be at a level where you can hang. Otherwise, you might make your push in the beginning of the match. You come out empty-handed. Fucsovics came out empty-handed after playing an hour and a half, grinding his face off in the first set. And then he's like, wait, I lost the set that I did all that work for?
Yeah.
Well,
it's a mental grind. It really is, as well as physical. And I know a couple of coaches on tour that kind of coach the mentality of make the other guy quit. Do whatever you have to do to make the other guy raise the white flag. And that's what Novak does so well. And it may be physical, it may be mental, it may be from a scoreboard standpoint of just getting into their service games over and over and again, making their service games uncomfortable. But you know, you've heard it said about the big three many times, people just fold like a lawn chair in the closing arguments of these matches. Not that Fokina did that so much, but the third set was much easier.
Well, I think a lot of us thought that was going to happen. 2 tiebreaks. Oh my God, I've thrown everything hand. They're also, in the course of the big three 20 years period, far less chances to gain experience playing matches of this length. You know, there used to be more best of 5 formats at some of the Masters Thousands, Davis Cup. That's all been curtailed. The only restaurant you can get a best of 5 set match is at a major. And that's kind of, whoa, that's a gulp. And granted, you could practice them. I'd be curious to talk to some coaches and players to see if they ever play 5 sets of practice matches.
What do you think the answer would be?
Not that much. Not
Agreed.
that much. I think
I would guess no.
I think the whole way the game has evolved, and I'm going to sound like a coot here. Back in my day, we played a lot more practice matches. I mean, you know, I'm a hack, and I played 30 sets in 14 days when I was 16 years old. You know, I mean, and far fewer of that, and that's built into the whole culture of the game now.
Pros too? Or are you talking about rec players or pro players?
The whole cycle from learning from juniors to recreational. It's kind of like the mindset of practice sets. Practice sets are less significant, and I think that extends itself into the pro world. I'd love to be proven wrong, but I suspect pros don't play as many practice sets as they used to either.
Well, do you mean though like a set, or let's play a match? You know,
All
like
let's play. Like Roy Emerson told me when he was prepping for Wimbledon one year, tired of all the rain at Queen's Club, he would find a place. We're going to practice on the indoor boards that are even faster than grass, and we're going to play 6 sets to get ready for 5. Ken Rosewall was sometimes playing 7 sets when he was 47, 48 years old. So I think all of the above. I think a practice match and at least a practice set, I think there's way less emphasis on that. So I think, again, so to get back to Davidovich Fokina, look, that guy is a workhorse. I mean, he's a great, great player, but I just wonder what his practice routines are that gets him ready to like, oh, now it's Friday at Roland Garros and I'm playing Novak best of 5 match. What do I bring to this other than fitness and a lot of 2 out of 3 set matches?
Yeah, I mean, on the Fokina topic, I just think there's something psychologically. First of all, discipline, which was actually good at times in this match. But I think psychologically, it's just how do you stay calm when your heart rate is at 140? Is that medically high? Is that high? No, 160. I think that's a good high heart rate. Anyway, hopefully I'm not way off. But bringing it back to Djokovic, I want to talk about the health and I want to talk about the wind. Let's start with the wind because it may be more it might be a thing of the past, it might not. I don't know. The first week of Paris, the entire time it's been windy. And we can also bring the conditions into play where the balls have been somewhat slow. They're fluffing up. Everyone is saying that they're different balls than what they've been. I don't know why. It's been Wilson since 2019. It's still Wilson. Why are the balls different this year? I don't know, but the locker room doesn't like it, and it's playing very slow. I do have numbers that have confirmed that it's basically Rome. The rate at which players are holding serve is basically the same as Rome. And of course, Rome was these sopping wet clay courts, and that is how the dry clay courts of Roland Garros are playing.
So you're saying that in extremely dry conditions, by the way, like it's freaking drought there this year. And it's it's warm. It's not hot. It's warm. And the wind, I actually looked into the wind. And I know that sometimes in Chatrier it can be a little more gusty because of the way that the building is. But the wind isn't actually classified as high wind or anything even close to it. It's classified as breezy. But you're saying, Gil, that the ball perhaps is making up for the fact that it hasn't been rainy in Paris to the point that conditions are very similar.
Exactly. It's a slow ball, not out of the can, but once they play a couple points with it, and you could see it on one of the replays, actually on an Alcaraz backhand in his match against Shapovalov, you can see the ball is like 1.5 times the size of what a tennis ball should be because there's so much fluff on it. I mean, and I was calling a match today with you always forget what matches you call. It was Hachinov and how can I not remember this? Kokonakis. Thank you, Joel. They were both furious that they were watering the court. They're just like, the court is slow enough. Stop watering it. It's not slippery. The ball's not bouncing. So wind, slow. First of all, I'm curious to see how you guys think that Novak has handled these things, especially the wind. But I think the most notable thing is he had to kind of play Davidovich Fokina without the help of his serve, which is actually a huge disadvantage for him in that matchup. He has a much better serve than ADF. But in this match, it was like, we might as well kind of start the point with underhand feed because the serve just isn't really going to do much.
I think for this match, I think that all those intruders to the mix all favor the house, as in Novak. In other words, wind, footwork, margin, self-awareness. Good. I don't have to redline. I'm not going to redline. And the underdog needs as much stuff. That's why I don't believe the phrase that the wind is an equalizer. It's not an equalizer. It's an intruder for both players. And actually, if I'm the underdog and I'm trying to play someone who I'm trying to beat, I don't want a wind. I don't want this other uninvited guest messing me up. I want a pristine thing, so I got as much space to work with as possible. So I think that stuff works in Novak's favor. In other words, so serve, okay, so I won't get as many freebies on my serve. He's not going to get too many either, even though his serve is worse, and he's got less space to work with. He's got a smaller canvas. So he needs to be a shot maker. He needs to play the game of tomorrow. Like I said, Davidovich Fokina, a little bit of a Alcaraz light in certain ways. But if you don't have as much court to work with, that's harder to go for those lines and spins and angles. Can't do as much of that. Got to play it more through the B and C part of the court.
And yet Novak still won in straight sets, even though it could have been a match of underhand feeds. That just tells you, yes, his serve is great. And didn't he have one game that he lost a serve where he double faulted 3 times, I think?
He did.
And yet he still wins in straight sets. That just tells you the quality of every aspect of his game. I do think that from what I observed, first of all, depth. He's just a master at depth. He absorbed pace really well because, as you mentioned, ADF hits a very powerful ball. But when he was absorbing pace, he wasn't just defending, he was sending it back deep. So it's kind of like a tricky or sleight of hand way that he goes from defense to offense. And he also, on some of the points that ended in drop shots or ended at one or both players at the net, I really felt that Novak was in the chess game where he was thinking, okay, I'm going to place the ball here, and then I'm going to wait for you to get it. It will come back to me. Then I'm going to place it here. Then you might go up, and then I'll finish the point. Whereas ADF on those points was a little bit more winging it as opposed to the chess game.
Well, that's life against the better player. I mean, that's kind of what happens. If not winging, it's just in kind of like uncertain territory, and Novak's the house. This is what happens for everyone playing a better player.
Yeah, well, I agree with Novak's defense being the most impressive part of his performance. I thought his movement and his scrambling was really good, and again, also his cardio in the big points, I thought kind of passed the test. And it's one area where I had some questions, right? I was curious about what level his cardio would be at, and I was impressed with that. I do think he hasn't figured out playing with the wind in this tournament. I think he struggled against Vucevic, playing with the wind, and I thought he struggled a little bit with Davidovich Fokina on that end as well. Just not calibrating the footwork quite well enough where he ends up kind of reaching for the ball, not hitting out confidently. Ideally with the wind, it's really the better side to, play heavy topspin so the ball doesn't fly on you, but play aggressive. Like use the wind behind your back to push your opponent back. But I feel like Novak, with his footwork, not being sure of himself, he hasn't been able to kind of use that advantage. Plus the serve, the three double fault game you're mentioning, Amy, that was with the wind.
Mhm.
And I don't know that he loves hitting his kick serve with the wind right now. No, I don't think anybody does, but it seems especially uncomfortable for him. So I see what you're saying, Joel, about Novak being more well equipped to deal with the wind because of the discipline and, some of the precision stuff. But I think Davidovich Fokina actually took advantage of it in a lot of ways to his advantage. And I feel like the best thing for Novak would be the wind going away for the second week.
That's true, because now it's higher stakes and different opponents. Nonetheless, I just think the experienced person is familiar with these things. Davidovich Fokina, if I'm his coach, I'm looking and say, hey, we made some pretty serious inroads here. This is an interesting thing. You play like that, Gill's not gonna call you the best player outside the top 25. Because if you can push Novak that way, think of what you can do with some of these other guys who are higher up the charts than you. I mean, I would love to see Davidovich Fokina play Tiafoe. That's a match I would enjoy seeing.
That would be fun. He needs to focus, though. Like, you can't just bring that intensity to Novak Djokovic on Chatrier. Anyone can bring that intensity in that match, okay? Like, that's easy. Can you go to court 6 and play your first round match and focus every point and not make silly decisions and not get down on yourself?
And win it, right, and win it routinely. That's that whole calibration of riding on emotion as opposed to with emotion, and how you maintain your intensity without it tipping over and having these spikes, these up and down spikes in energy. That's absolutely right. And how you maintain that. And you look how that might be one of the big three's most commendable things, is how they just keep on purring. Of course, it helps when you're winning a lot.
I want to read a quote from Djokovic in his press conference about his physical state. He took a medical timeout in this match at one point, or he saw the physio. Was it an official timeout? I'm not quite sure. Novak said, quote, "We don't have much time to start to name the many injuries I have, and the list is quite long. I don't want to sit here and talk about these things that are not preventing me from playing. These are the circumstances that you, as a professional athlete, have to deal with. Accept it. Sometimes you need help from a physio during the match. Sometimes you need pills. Sometimes you need help from God or angels or whoever. The reality for me nowadays is that my body is responding differently than it did a few years ago. I have to adjust to this new reality. So to say, but at the end of the day, I managed to finish the match."
Well, that's great. He's very, it's fascinating. The scope of the things he cited is tremendous. So there you go. And that's pretty interesting. From even time waits for no one, even Novak. And not that his time is anywhere near, because he's so fit and so formidable, but he's speaking some things that maybe we'll never know.
But he's got that patch on his chest. He's got that. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. Gil? Yeah. So it's a Tau patch, TAO PATCH. On the official website, it says it's a nanotechnology that turns body heat into light before sending that light back through the nervous system. And Novak, during his match against Vucevic, not only took the court with this Tau patch, but got a Tau patch replacement mid-match.
Yeah. The thing I love about Novak is that he's willing to experiment with all sorts of stuff. And you know what? Some of this stuff is actually proven. Like, I joke about him sitting in his own little hyperbaric chamber, but guess what? In the elite places of medicine for elite athletes around the world, and others that really need good, strong healing, hyperbaric chambers do work. They're just expensive and hard to find access to one. But cancer patients use them for healing and that kind of thing. So some of this stuff is proven, but it's just so Novak, isn't it, to experiment with something like this and to bring it out at the French Open. And there's also something very strong called a placebo effect. So even if it's unproven technology, if he thinks it's helping him, then it's probably going to help him.
Should we be pronouncing it Tao as in Taoism? Is that Tao? Isn't that kind of there's some, where's it from, Gill? Is it from?
I don't think it's. I don't know where they're based, but I will look into that.
Either way, I like the way you explained it, Amy. It's kind of like it can work, but more what matters, particularly in tennis. Do you think it works? You're right. Do you think it works? And if you and I think this is part of Novak. I think part of Novak's legacy is this endless quest to understand things. Back to the teacher who was music, and he was reading a biography of Tesla, and just ways of trying to understand how the world works.
Yeah, I'm on the website. Sorry, Joel, didn't mean to cut you off. I'm on the website right now, and the top of the page, right, is explaining the technology and what it does and how it works and who the CEO is and the instructions and the testimonials. On the bottom of the page, there's all of these research papers, links to research papers from universities. So I mean, if I wanted to sit here and read for 3 hours, I'm pretty sure that's available for me. But it reminds me of Tom Brady. It reminds me of some of LeBron and some of the basketball players who have played for a long time. I remember Amare Stoudemire, who played for the Knicks, and some of the NBA players started to bathe in wine. And I don't think it's the conversation is whether like, oh, like, is this scientifically 100% proven or is it not? I don't think that's the conversation. I think the conversation is, are you obsessively figuring out ways to help your body? And that attitude, whether or not the thing is the key or the stretching or the this or the that, it's the attitude of obsessively working on this that is what is going to make Novak Novak.
Look, and also at this stage, and I've talked about this times with Martina Navratilova, who was a longevity genius. They know how to play the game. I mean, they're going to add things. There'll be wrinkles. There'll be shots. There'll be techniques. There'll be tactics. But then it's kind of, how do I keep this body? How to keep the body working? Completely the opposite of 99% of tennis players, including pros, including other pros, but certainly further down the chain that way. So Novak, yeah, how do I keep the hardware sound and healthy?
Actually two more Novak topics. First of all, one of the storylines beginning of the tournament was the message that he wrote on the camera regarding Kosovo. I've been, so buried with commentary and all of that I had no chance to really even look into this. But Amy, I know that you have. So did you want to share any of your thoughts on that situation?
Yeah, this would be of interest to me because I did major in government, and of course it was though an American concentration. So I took very few international relations courses, but it was interesting to me. And this is also Novak-like. He's going into a major tournament where he could break the record, and Nadal's not there, and he begins the tournament by doing something very controversial. And I tried to read. I spent, half a day reading about a dozen articles on the Balkans and the history and all that. And let's just say I know enough not to know enough. I shouldn't comment on it because I don't know anything about it. But from a character study point of view, as someone who follows Novak Djokovic, I just found it interesting that he made that choice, and that he felt that it was something that he wanted to speak out on. And we've often talked about what these players might do, our thoughts on what these players might do after they retire. And I said on that show that I thought Novak might go into politics because he certainly has that interest. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, he's certainly proven that if he believes in something, he's gonna say it. He's and this is not shade or a knock, but he's not gonna stay neutral like Switzerland. Next round
Is that
opponent.
a reference to Roger? Is that a reference to Roger?
Well, okay, it's a double entendre. Neutral like Switzerland is a thing. Did Roger embody that? Would Roger get himself? Would Roger take a side on a polarizing issue or a topic? No, he probably wouldn't. So in that way, I mean it both ways.
Mm-hmm.
Next round opponent for Novak is on court right now. It'll be Juan Pablo Varillas, who is up a break and battling in a 4-2 service game in the fifth, or Hubert Hurkacz. Very different style of opponents. So Joel, I guess let's go with both scenarios. Hurkacz, maybe a top 5, not maybe, definitely a top 5 first serve in men's tennis. Varillas, a unheralded South American who loves the clay and is going to be very, very consistent off the ground.
Varillas is and also very arguably a little bit tired if he wins this match from having played 5 sets to beat a seed. And I think Novak is going to feel comfortable out against either of them for different reasons. I think based on Varillas, if he wins, he's going to have played the match of his life to beat a seed and find himself in the round of 16 of a major. Hurkacz, I think on clay is a pretty comfortable matchup for Novak. I think he's not going to be able to assert himself attacking long enough over that period of time on clay. On grass, it might be a little bit different, perhaps, but I think I think both of these are comfortable matchups for Novak.
Yeah, and there just certainly isn't Hurkacz who wants to get a lot of purchase out of his first serve. It's just tough to do. I will say I've watched Hubie play throughout the tournament. He's playing at a much higher level than he had been in the lead into Roland Garros, and he has impressed me. But as a baseliner, Novak is going to really outgun him, and I think
he'll pick apart that forehand. He's going to pick apart that Hurkacz forehand, and there's going to be that which is too flat for today's tennis. Though he's great. I like Hurkacz a lot. I like the way he plays. But I think on clay versus Novak, and then you add in some of the other condition factors we've talked about this year at Roland Garros. Yeah, I think either's a comfortable matchup for Novak.
Yeah, absolutely. The forehand would be the side to attack. Struggles to accelerate on it. We will end on some Nadal news, which broke really just as we started recording. His team has announced that he's undergoing arthroscopic surgery to examine the left PSOAS muscle that has kept him out of competition since January. So obviously a muscle in the abductor region. So I imagine around the groin area. Surgery is being done in Barcelona. And that is the update. Generally, arthroscopic surgeries are not very intrusive. So that's where Rafa's at. Any reaction to that, Amy?
I think I saw too that Rafa's going to update. So Rafa's presence will be felt during Roland Garros after all, and there will be something to talk about. I just, I hope for the best.
Yeah, I guess the slight little note on it is, okay, let's see how that affects the potential. We talked about the US Open, the training, with Nadal, remember, we always got to back into the pre-production cycle of training. And so how this then delays that. So that makes me even more surprised if we see him in action in calendar 23.
Yes. And that I think is that's really the question right now is, are we looking at start of 2024 as the goal? Or are we looking still at 2023? As for Novak Djokovic, we're looking at the 4th round and beyond at Roland Garros. That'll do it for this episode of 3. Remember, we're available on all podcast platforms. And if you're watching on YouTube, we appreciate if you like, comment, and subscribe. We will see you next time on the next episode of 3.